So I started out with the camera like this. The first thing you might notice is the size. The camera recorded on an 8mm DAT tape. Yes, a tape like this one. And you know what? It worked excellent for me at the time. Obviously and thankfully, technology has evolved over the years and today's cameras are much more compact and easier to use. With these old 8mm DAT cameras, you had to play the video back through a device like this onto your computer while it was running video capture software. So if you had 2 hours of video, you had to sit and play back that 2 hours of video at real time speed. So it took 2 hours to capture that video from the beginning to the end off of the camera. Now, as archaic as that may sound, you know what? It was state of the art back then and it worked perfectly fine for me. In fact, if push came to shove and I had to go out today with the same equipment, I don't think it would hinder my surveillance at all. What I really want you to understand is that it is not as much what type of camera you have, more than how you use that camera that's most important. I could use one of these, or I could use one of these, which is my current camera of choice, and I can basically do the same job. This video is sponsored by OREP Insurance and Working PI Magazine. OREP is a leading provider of private investigator liability insurance. Visit orep.org for a quote today. When looking for a good surveillance camera, you need to keep these things in mind. First is your budget. This is a business after all, folks. As I said before, there is no need to break the bank on this purchase. When I started, I always went to eBay and I got used like new or used very good condition cameras to get me started. Now, as far as the specifications for your camera, you want to consider these features. Color is always important to me. People are going to notice that hot pink camera that you have in your hands. Just trust me on this one. My preference is always black or dark blue. This helps the camera not be as visible inside your vehicle. Next is the optical zoom that the camera has. Now, you will see all kinds of cameras out there that are advertising 500x, 1000x, 2000x zoom, and even higher. These huge numbers are digital zoom. Generally speaking, you never want to use digital zoom. It degrades the quality of the video considerably, and it is, well, a digital reproduction of what the camera actually sees. I would recommend to have 40x optical zoom, at the very minimum 30x optical zoom. The camera I mainly use, the Panasonic HCV180, has 50x optical zoom, 500x digital zoom, and this really cool feature called 90x intelligent zoom. Next, you want to consider the media type in which the video is saved onto on the camera. As I stated before, 8mm DAT should probably not be used today. Most cameras have either a solid state module or a solid state drive, or sometimes an actual physical drive built into them, or some use an SD card or a micro SD card. Now, the biggest concern for the media type is going to be the amount of storage. My Panasonic has an SD card in it, which is really nice. If you're running out of memory, you can just pop in a new card and keep going. I have a 64GB card in there and I film at 1080p and have never ran out of space, and I have gone over 6 hours of video in one day too. But I do carry a spare card just in case. I also make sure I pull my video every day after my surveillance so I can clear up that space and ensure that I have a good copy of the valuable evidence that I have on video. Next item to look at is the video quality your camera can obtain. Now, we're going to get a little bit technical here. Just hang on with me. I shoot everything in 1080p 60 frames per second. When it comes to surveillance video, I see little to no difference between 1080p 60 and 4K except for the size of the video file. Keep in mind, even 1080p 60 frames per second files will be quite large. I just got done with a case where I had nearly 2 hours of video of my subject. My files were huge and difficult to get to my customer. In these cases, what I do is either compile the video in 720p 60 frames per second, which is still excellent quality video, half the size of the file, or I'll put them into multiple videos to send to my client. When it comes to video quality, I would not consider anything below 720p, preferred 1080p. If you think of your screen as a bunch of dots with 720p, you will have 1,280 dots, or what we call pixels, going from left to right across your screen in a line, which is called a row. We will then have 720 rows going up from the bottom to the top. So this equals a little less than 1 million dots or pixels on your screen at any time. But wait, hang on. Now let's look at 1080p. That's 1,920 dots going across in each row and 1,080 rows going up. So there are over 2 million pixels for every picture frame. Pretty big difference there. But what does that P at the end of the 1080p or the 720p stand for? There is 1080p and 1080i as well, 720p and 720i. The P means progressive and the I means interlace. The simplest way for me to explain this, folks, in my not-so-techno mumbo-jumbo way is like this. In 1080p, you have those 1080 rows going from the bottom to the top on your screen. In progressive, it scans across from left to right, each row at a time. 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, all the way to the top, and then it comes all the way back down and starts again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, with Interlace 1080, it does the same thing, but it skips every other row. So it will scan across row 1, then row 3, then row 5, and so on until it gets to the top. And then it'll come back down and it'll do row 2, and then row 4, and then row 6. And when it gets to the top, it'll come back. And most cameras, you can choose between 60 FPS or 30 FPS. 60 FPS basically means that there are 60 pictures or frames in every second of the video. 30 FPS means there's 30 frames in every second of video. Now, megapixels are going to be related to the still images that the camera can take. Most video cameras can also take still photos. Mine has a little button on top that I can hit, and voila, it takes a picture. In fact, with my camera, I can be shooting video at the same time and then hit that little button, and I can take a still picture. Another feature you want to make sure that your camera has is low light or nighttime video capability. I'm not talking about something like military grade night vision. It means it does good in low light to near no light situations. My camera is set for automatic to adjust for lighting, and it does a great job in most scenarios. Now, this feature is often called something different. It could be low light, no light, nighttime, low lux, twilight, things like that. Now, here are some other features you will want to look for. Image stabilization is huge. This uses technology to eliminate that shaky hand syndrome we all get once we start shooting video or taking photos and the adrenaline starts pumping. Manual and autofocus is important as well. As a general rule, I leave my camera on autofocus, but I know a lot of PIs that prefer manual. If I need, I can quickly change over to manual on my camera in the field, so I just leave mine on auto most of the time. Recording formats are another big thing to keep in mind. My camera does AV-CHD, Advanced Video Coding High Definition, MP4, and MPEG. These formats are the most popular. I have my camera set for the AV-CHD. Now, when I edit and I compile my video, then I compile to a different format, but I want the raw video to be in as high definition as possible. Battery life is another huge thing to consider. Even if you're like me and you have your camera plugged in all the time while you're out on surveillance, if you need to take it out on foot surveillance or outside of your vehicle, you need to have plenty of battery life and keep a spare charged battery handy at all times. The bottom line, when it comes to picking your surveillance camera, folks, make sure it is a brand name. Panasonic, Nikon, Sony, Fuji are all usually good brands. If it sounds like some cheap Chinese knockoff, folks, it probably is some cheap Chinese knockoff. Also, always do your homework. Get on YouTube, search for that camera, the make and the model, look at reviews, go on Google, do the same thing. And always, always, always consider your budget. Used is fine when you get started out. I always recommend to have 2 surveillance cameras in case something bad happens.